COVID-19 pandemic has defined our times, not just because of the virus itself, but the ways in which it has revealed and aggravated our society's inequalities. Some of these inequalities deal with health, as we've seen disparities between who has access to services and vaccines and who doesn't. This is true both among countries and within individual nations. Across the globe, we've seen how the poorest and most vulnerable populations were the most impacted, and we witnessed how many of the least developed countries struggled to manage the pandemic. But the crisis isn't just sanitary. The economic impact of the virus has been disproportionately unequal. Millions of ordinary people lost their jobs, while billionaires had the biggest increase in wealth ever. We also can't ignore the psychological aftermath of the pandemic, especially for young people whose educational, social, and cultural lives have been uprooted. This is a group that probably paid the highest social economic price of the pandemic, even though youth were the least exposed to its health concerns. These inequalities tell us that our problem isn't just one for the present. We will continue to have a problem in the future if we don't address the inequalities that COVID-19 has precipitated. They hamper our collective capacity for resilience and innovation. The sustainability of our societies is at stake.
In country after country, public outrage has been provoked by deliberate policy choices made by governments. Such choices that have generated upheaval when seen as deliberately benefiting a small group of elite while blatantly ignoring or undermining the rights and needs of populations who already live in a state of deprivation and despair. We need leaders to deepen solidarity across societies by actively fighting systemic prejudice and discrimination. People of all ages and affiliations should have the means and resources to actively understand, influence, and engage with public policies. We need to foster dialogue and initiative across all sections of society and demonstrate an inclusive approach to leadership that celebrates a creative and collaborative engagement with diversity and dissent. Every country must put in place the infrastructure and investment needed for a strong, networked, and fully empowered civil society. We must have stronger national and international laws that protect civil society and civic freedoms, and a fully resourced mechanism for democracy to ensure the effective implementation of these laws. The protection of civic space cannot be an afterthought. Civil society must have the resources it needs to fulfill its crucial role in securing accountability and ensuring that no one is left behind.
It is only by fixing inequality and exclusion in the world that we can build forward better from ongoing global challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic. And we cannot tackle inequality without meaningful and diverse youth engagement at all levels of decision making, affecting people, planet, and prosperity. With that in mind, last year, heads of state requested that the UN Secretary General to report back with recommendations to advance our common agenda and to respond to current and future challenges. Following extensive consultations with governments, thought leaders, civil society, young people, and the UN, the report was launched a few days ago. Our common agenda is an agenda of action designed to strengthen and accelerate multilateral agreements, particularly the 2030 Agenda, and make a tangible difference in people's lives. It is rooted in the knowledge that we are at an inflection point in history, and our action or inaction today will determine whether we break down or break through these crises. Young people know this, and they have been raising their voices, employing their most innovative solutions, holding leaders accountable, and activating their peers to drive the transformational change we need to build a better world for all. With our common agenda, we have a unique opportunity to break through together. Reimagine what meaningful youth engagement looks like, remove obstacles that stand in the way of young people achieving their full potential and realizing their fundamental human rights, and closing the gap to achieve equality and inclusion. I urge world leaders to work with youth in all their diversity, especially those who are coming from communities and social groups poorly represented in the national and global governance systems, to be a central part of the rebuilding process. and I stand ready to work with all of you to deepen our solidarity with the world's young people and future generations.
Courageous government reformers and civil society activists across our 78-country Open Government Partnership are bridging the divide by empowering marginalized groups at the bottom of society and reining in the abusers of power at the top. For instance, they're enhancing access to justice for the historically marginalized Roma community in North Macedonia, or those living below the poverty line in Indonesia, and they're combating corruption and capture at the top, for instance through open contracting in Ukraine or open company ownership in Nigeria. These reforms are encouraging, but still too few to tackle the massive challenge of inequality. Let us join forces to scale these up.
Now is the time to start our process of healing, not only from the pandemic, but also from decades of division and discrimination. Everyone has a stake in this endeavor, especially young people who are our change makers for today and tomorrow. Progress is within reach if world leaders from all countries and regions rally to empower their youth, especially those that belong to the vulnerable groups and conflict-afflicted communities, to be a central part of a global movement for inclusion and solidarity.